And good morning, folks. Today's July 15th, 2021. We're at the Podman Community Cabal meeting. This is the first time that we've done this with the community. It's very exciting for the maintainers. We're all looking forward to this and hoping that this will be something that will be of use for people going forward. And a big thank you to Eric Burnoff for first putting this forward as something that we could do and should do. And I think it's a great idea. So thank you, Eric, for bringing that forward to us. Going forward, if you have any topics that you'd like to add to the agenda, I've thrown the agenda up. It's in HackMD, and if somebody could throw it into the notes or chat for me. Oh, Rishi's already beaten me to it.
Yeah, I can paste it again for the new people.
Okay. And it's also on the Podman Community's site. So I thought what we'd do to start here is just talk about what this meeting is and how it differs from the community meeting. And this meeting is generally for doing design topics and talking about issues that are ongoing with the maintainers and anybody from the community that's interested. Whereas the community meeting is more of a, here's a demo of some neat stuff that we have, not only from the maintainers, but anybody who's interested in presenting there. And then it's also a good spot for us to make announcements for upcoming releases or changes that we're thinking about there rather than diving down. But in both places, we're open to having an open discussion at the end for the last 15 minutes or so. And that's what we'll do today. So just for today, I would like to do just a quick introduction of everybody. And I will ask people to pick somebody after they've introduced themselves. So I'll go first. I'm Tom Sweeney. I'm one of the software engineers for Red Hat, working on Builda and Podman mostly, also a little bit of Scopio. And I run the community stuff for our projects. And given that, I'm going to tag Eric, since he started us off with this meeting. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Eric. I was previously a Red Hat employee and currently looking what my next position will be. And yeah, I'm very passionate about Podman as a tool. And I think more people and more companies should use it. So I try to promote it in all kinds possible. And I want to be part of the community more. And yeah, I like that we have some kind of visual format that I can see some faces. Like the first time I see Lokesh's face, hi. And yeah, here and there I have some topics, like you saw maybe in the email threads that I discussed something in some place, sometimes a smaller thread and sometimes the complete list. For instance, we discussed last time about the training. I'm currently also doing the DO 180 training, and we discussed that the Podman version there is a little bit too old maybe, so when we run into bugs, it's really hard to figure out if this is a bug that is already fixed. And that would also be something that I want to add to the agenda today to discuss later. Thanks.
Now you got to tag somebody, Eric.
Then I continue with Lokesh because I mentioned him already.
Hi, I'm Lokesh. I'm part of the containers team at Red Hat. I mostly maintain packages for Fedora and OBS and a few things here and there upstream. And yeah, I'm the guy getting yelled at when packages break. So that's pretty much me. I will tag Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Evich. I do automation stuff, running all of our mostly CI based automation and continuous testing for the containers repos. Let's see, I didn't hear from Dan yet, so I'll tag Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Walsh. I am Chief Architect of all things containers. So I do a little bit of everything. I will tag Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I work on the containers team, so Podman Builda. I mostly recently have been working on a lot of secret stuff. So if that breaks, let me know. And also some Podman on Mac stuff as well. I will tag Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm an intern with the containers team. I've been with them for the last month and a half now. I'm a rising junior at the College of Holy Cross in Massachusetts. And recently I've been working on a lot of Podman Pod Create stuff and the image SCP feature, which we're going to talk about today. So I will tag Valentin.
All right, I'll make it quick. Valentin, one of Dan's plumbers, also not necessarily being attached to anything specific, also working a little bit around the stack. I'm gonna tag, how about Reinhard?
Hey, I'm Reinhard. I'm not affiliated with Red Hat, but I am affiliated with both Debian and Ubuntu. So I help out with keeping the Podman and Friends packages up to date in Debian and make sure that they flow to the most recent version of Ubuntu. In that way, I'm helping Lokesh quite a bit. If you have any questions or concerns about the packages that come with the Debian Ubuntu distributions, please reach out to me. Who wasn't so far? I'm tagging Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm also an intern at the containers team right now. I'm studying in Germany IT security at the moment. So yeah, let's go with Brent.
Okay, I'm Brent Bowdy. I am affiliated with Red Hat, and I'm currently acting as the Podman architect, as well as general code monkey, fill in the blank. I will tag Anders.
Yeah, I'm Anders. I guess I'm associated with the Kubernetes Minikube, but I'm also been working on some like boot Podman distributions and other container stuff. Let's see who's next. Nalin.
Okay, hi, I'm Nalan Daiba. I work on the containers team over here at Red Hat under Dan and with everybody else who's here. Usually on Builda and other supporting libraries are used by Podman because I'm mainly interested in building container images. I will tag Pavel. Whoops, I will tag Ed Haynes.
Hi, I'm Ed Haynes. I'm a solution architect at Red Hat, and I've just always been interested in sort of the lower level of containers. My background is in little itty bitty embedded devices, so I just sort of like the lightweight nature of it. So who's left here?
Hands raised. You have 3 or 4 at least.
Okay. If you haven't talked yet, raise your hand.
How do I see who's raised their hand?
Oh, you don't see it.
Okay, so I'll tag Matt.
Hi, so I'm Matt Heon. I have been on the containers team for going on 6 years now, and I've been with Podman since its beginning. I'm one of the core maintainers. Let's see who hasn't gone. I don't think I've heard from Miloslav yet.
Hi, I'm Miloslav Trmať with the Red Hat Containers team, primarily working around container images. Taking a Russian.
Hi, I'm Urvashi Monani. I'm the team lead for the containers team, and I work on Podman, Builda, and Cryo here and there. I think Pavel is the only one left.
Did we hear from Ed?
Oh, Ed, yeah. Sorry.
Hi, Ed Santiago, Red Hat, just a Kiwi monkey. And no, Pavel is muted, and we have not heard from him.
He wants to remain silent.
Tom, you're muted. Move on.
Yeah, I'm as muted as Pavel was, so that didn't work out so well. Okay, so I'm going to open up the discussions. We had 3 things to talk about now. We had Podman Image CP, new features for Podman Play Cube, and a discussion for the training team. And that one was from Eric. So do we have anything else to discuss today offhand? Right. Well, what I'm going to do is open this up for free discussion. I'm going to try and corral it if I think it gets a little too rat-holed and or based on time. And we'll try to leave the last 15 minutes open for any remaining topics or further discussions. So who wants to lead the Podman image?
Charlie, can you throw up your slide thing?
Yeah, sure.
So the history of this is Ed on our team does a lot of fancy QE stuff, and one of the things he wanted was a easy way to move images from one type of storage, basically from container storage to container storage. But he had noticed that basically now we have Podman and Podman Remote built into the same tools. So the idea he came up with was to be able to copy. Right now, if I want to move, say, an image from my machine to another machine, I got to push the image to a registry, and then I got to go to the other machine, and I got to pull the image from the registry. Right? That's sort of the workflow that we're all familiar with. Or I have to create a tarball image, copy it over, and then load it. So what Ed has suggested is, couldn't we, since we have a tool that can basically use SSH underneath the covers now with Podman Remote, couldn't we make it simpler to just move images around? And so we've been discussing this a little bit internally. Actually, most of the discussion was happening in a specific issue that was or a pull request that Charlie had produced for us. And my problem with the pull request that he originally did is I couldn't understand how this command was going to work. And so there's a lot of discussion that went on in there. And what I was suggesting at the time was that the command that Charlie originally designed was called Podman Image SCP. And for those that don't use SSH, SCP is a form of SSH for copying, say, files around. So you can copy over SSH files from one machine to another. And what he suggested was that a new command called Podman Image SCP. And so when I went and looked at it, we went back and forth on how the interface for this would work. And you can see some examples here where, Podman Image SCP Alpine to Fedora host : and in this case, Fedora host could either be a connection defined in your connection database for Podman Remote, or it could be an actual TCP/IP address, or it could be a host name. So you could do, I think, does he have an example here? Well, for instance, you might be able to do a Podman Image SCP Alpine root at localhost, and you'd be able to copy, say, from your local storage and rootless environment into a rootful, your root storage, or vice versa. And really, so underneath the covers, there's been a lot of talks about how we could design this and how we could make it work. And some of that stuff is Charlie is describing on the right side of the arrows, to do basically a local save and a remote load. And but to me, that's noise at this point. What I'm trying to figure out is what is the best UI design or CLI design for how users could be able to take advantage of this. I got really excited because I think this happens a fair amount where people want to, they have images on one machine and they just want to move them to another machine, and they don't want to go through the rigmarole of pushing them out to a registry, or from, I downloaded and built a container as root, or an image as root, and now I want to test it as rootless. And, what do I do in that case? How do I handle that? And it just seemed like a really good idea to take advantage of what Podman can provide for that functionality. So we did some discussion on this interface. There has been some discussion about whether or not we make this another transport. Those that don't know what a transport is, transports are, containers storage is a transport. Containers, it's called the Docker transport. It's the way we talk to a container registry. And there's OCI transport, and but basically when you run a container, we could do a Podman run, Fedora host : Alpine, and run a container. And then if we went with that type of UI, what would happen underneath the covers is, we would actually use Podman Remote to pull from wherever the image is stored, say on the Fedora host, and pull it to your local machine, and then run it without going through a registry. And as opposed to you're making a specific command to be able to do this. So these are the types of discussions we've been having, and so we just wanted to open it up. I would like to avoid getting into the end of the cover stuff because I think we can over time improve. If we just do a pod, the equivalent of a Podman save or a Podman, and then a Podman push of the remote load, like he's specifying, that's fine for the beginning, but eventually I think we'll want to get better at this, especially when people start to experiment with larger and larger images. There might be better ways of handling this. But anyways, so I think we had an internal meeting yesterday. We went back and forth on the two ideas, and I think we ended up saying that our thoughts right now were more towards just sticking with the Podman image SCP. So anybody else want to chime in on this? I think it's a good idea, bad idea. It was suggested that we could also do this. I mean, you could do this with bash scripting now, right? I mean, you could do the Podman save and a Podman remote load. But I think personally, I would like to have it as a standard part of the Podman command.
The two colons are to specify the difference between like image version and then like host like image. So it's just a way of differentiating like syntactically between which one's which. And just
we already have at least two meanings for the colon character.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the advanced ideas I was thinking about is you could potentially use. Right now, we're talking container storage to container storage, but I could envision an enhancement to this where you could use other types of so you could Podman pull Fedora host : dir / basically an image that's already been selected as a directory instead of using it out of container storage. So with the : was our effort to basically keep it away from a transport. So it's rather than saying this is a transport, it's something special.
And kind of building off what you were saying, Dan, with the whole image run potentiality, where you could basically use this in that way as well. An idea that I had was that we could kind of the way that I'm using save and load within this, you could make this a command, image SCP, and then use image SCP optionally within like things like run if it's specified by, like if the user puts a remote host with a double colon, you could then like under the covers call this, is what I was thinking when you were bringing up the other uses of it.
Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
So now mic on. I really love this feature. It's something I also missed before. If you want to handle images, then you don't necessarily have a registry at hand, right? And it's just also on localhost. If you have the different users and they all want to use the same image, why set up a registry just to have everything shared there? So I love this a lot. What I'm not so sure is if, for instance, new users, if for them this will be a confusion to have the SCP part and the local save and load in the same command. So maybe there I would make a cut and leave the save and load like more in the thinking of the backup section of commands. And the SCP part is also like in the SCP format from one host to the other, you also transform the tree, right? You don't transform a zip, or the zip is maybe just something you do to optimize the speed. But the main goal is not to transform the file, transfer as a file, right?
Yeah, the goal is not to transform the file, right? I mean, the goal is that the image would be exactly the same in both locations when it's done. Yeah, that's why underneath the covers we could experiment, with different mechanisms for optimizing this. And one of the things we have to watch out for is, say you're copying a multi-layer image, and we want to make sure that if on the remote end, 5 of the layers are already there, that we don't tar up all those layers and copy them over, right? That would, so we want to have the thing eventually optimized for the way a layered image works.
But it might be interesting to look at how Git does it, right? You can also work locally with Git pull push, and they have the same situation with their file format.
I would be interested. I mean, obviously, what I don't want to do is, I think we can get this feature done fairly quickly, and then we can optimize it in the future. What I don't want to do is argue around the underlying technology for the next, 3-4 months, and then, no one gets the feature. So the quicker we can get the feature, and then people can complain about, it's too slow. That's fine with me, right?
Yeah, and I think we already have a note about the local save and load. That's intended to capture the cross-user use case where you copy from root storage to a local storage or back, and we need to figure out how to define a syntax for that.
Yeah, I'd basically just put that in just as basically a placeholder for now until we figure out how to kind of wire that correctly. I just put as many use cases as I could generally, so that at the end of the day, we're not like going back and putting new things in, because they're all kind of just like there to begin with, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the third example on here is basically showing you copying from one remote machine to another remote machine. What he doesn't have here is the, you could rename. So, that Podman image SCP would be Fedora host 1 : Alpine, Fedora host 2 : my Alpine, right? So that we could tag differently. So I think things like that, we can easily add to protocol. But I mean, Millisoft can't. The problem with again, going back to the double host, the double colons, is that's our key inside of the CLI to tell us that this is something happening on, on an SSH, on a remote SSH place, as opposed to a colon, which would, we would look at as a transport. So that's why we came up with that syntax. Anybody else? Well, that's good. Everybody agrees with my idea. I always like that.
Well, Anders has his hand up. I'm not sure if he's agreeing with Eric, or Anders, did you have further?
No, thank you for explaining. I think the confusion is because there is a command called SCP, or there's actually two if you count Docker machine, and they use the kind of user at host : path thing, but they copy files, not images. So you have to remember that the command is image SCP and not file SCP or something.
Right. Well, I mean, should we use a different letters than SCP? I mean, SCP just to us indicated that we're using SSH.
Yeah, we spent a lot of byte shedding renaming it from SCP to CP in Minikube. I'm not sure it was worth the effort.
Right.
And it's always someone wants to call it COPY anyway, so I'm not sure if you can win that.
Right.
I think it makes sense to just think about it so that we don't continue with SCP by default without anybody actually considering the trade-offs. It's a good point to bring.
Yeah. I mean, SCP copy or CP is fine with me. I mean, it's not, so the SCP again was just so people know that it's using SSH under the covers. I mean, there are requirements here that you have a Podman running as a service on the remote machine, right? Or so, this won't work. This is not going to automatically start Podman service on a remote machine. So you have to set that up in order to get this to work.
So there are 2 more questions about it in the chat.
You beat me off the mute. So the nitpick, I think we kind of covered from Reinhardt, which was having Podman image copy versus Podman image SCP been debated. And I think we talked about that one. And
I think we debated it. We haven't come to any conclusion.
Yeah. And Pavel asked, is it a grammar change? Command versus protocol, SCP://.
Yeah, the problem with the SCP:// is that's very similar to our transports, and we don't want to get this into. We actually talked earlier in the week about should this be just another transport. And the problem with that is it sort of requires a service. So, Scopio and Builder are not going to have this feature. We need to have a Podman service running somewhere in order to make this work. Without us jumping through hoops and basically ended up creating something like Ansible. So I'd prefer to keep this as just a Podman command and to avoid, conflating this with transports versus a special SSH protocol thing that we built.
Yeah, it just happened to work pretty well with the Podman system connection stuff that was already in there. So you can that's why it's Fedora host, that name is specified through, that would have to add that through Podman system connection add before writing that in the image SCP command. Or as Dan said, you could just put a straight user at IP address. That would also work. But it prompts you to possibly use system connection add if you want. So that I just wanted to explain that part.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been a great discussion, but we're at the halfway point at this point. We have 2 more discussion topics plus an open forum. So unless anybody has any objections, I think we're going to move on to the next. Alrighty, so our next discussion was on Podman Play Cube. Is that yours, Brent, that you're leading?
I don't know where that came from, but I can certainly get the conversation going.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, Podman Play Cube. So this is kind of a twofold conversation. If you've seen me talk about Podman within the last year, and I think I've done stuff with our community meetings, Podman Play Cube, or Podman's ability to digest or spit out cube YAML, is a area in which I think Podman can grow significantly and continue to help developers be able to take their single node workloads and deploy them on Kubernetes infrastructure. And the way that command has been, those 2 commands, the way they've been growing essentially has been user demand. So someone will be using a YAML that they're familiar with, and then they'll find out that a certain portion of it doesn't work because we haven't implemented that part yet. And then that gets done, and that's how we've been kind of fielding user requests and growing that command, largely because we're not all kube experts on this team. And don't use kube practically enough in our day jobs to say, oh, it's obvious we need this to add in. So one portion is of this conversation is more of an ask that, for those that are kube experts and can advise us on things that need to be added, or can actually even write that up and submit it as a PR. Those are welcome. By no means is Podman Play Cube in the can and unchangeable.
I think I would add to that there's a lot of, one of the big features that we had with Podman 3.0 is that we supported Docker Compose, and which a ton of people are using now, Docker Compose against Podman service. Which is great, but we also, I always have, Brent wrote a great blog a couple of months ago, how to move from Compose to Kubernetes using Podman. And, what I'm interested right now in is, could we look at some of the features that Docker Compose has, and, could we add those as additional features to Podman Play Cube, so that we could allow users to write in Kubernetes YAML format, but then there's certain features that Compose does better than differently than say Kubernetes does, and we could make Podman Play Cube sort of bridge the gap. One of the goals with Podman, without writing a Podman Play Cube, is and Podman Generate Kube is to allow people to transition from a single node work environments to Kubernetes, and it's because there's two different YAML files, or command line to Kubernetes YAML. We wanted to, we just thought it was a cool idea to, you got your environment running well using standard Podman commands. Now can I get to Kubernetes from it? And frankly, one of our jobs in this team is to help customers get to OpenShift, and so in doing that, now we have sort of all you can do with you can run containers with the command line, you can run containers with Compose, and you can run it with Podman Play Cube. And a lot of our customers, or a lot of users of Podman, have kind of like the idea of using Kubernetes YAML file. So the question is, could we make it better? Yes. And as Brent said, we get pull. Actually, a lot of the community is enhancing Podman Play Cube, but could we even make it better so that it could be a rival to Compose? And that's something I would like to potentially dig into and understand the features of Compose. And I guess the standard one that Brent's been explaining to me is the ability to build images from Docker files or container files. So
so
potentially you could do something like that.
Yeah, there really are two we're looking at right now, and I'd be interested to hear if we're on the right track priority-wise. But the first one is to be able to build, as Dan said. So if you're familiar with Docker Compose, they have a directory structure where you can plop in Docker files, and then Docker Compose knows if the image is not present in the local store, they go ahead and build it. And the second one, which is I'm already working on, are the notion of init containers. So these would be containers that are run after the after a pod infra container. Then init containers would run, presumably do like setup jobs, and then the regular pod containers would run. So we're actually already implementing that, and that's moving forward in Podman, and then we'll get it to work in Play Cube. Evidently, that's a standard feature for Kubernetes. Are there other ones high on people's lists? Or, would be one question. Second question might be, you like these ideas. Do any of the two we explained concern you?
And we take silence as these are awesome ideas. That's the way we translate it in our brains.
Yep.
Not an idea so much, but I was wondering if you'd opened up a discussion topic inside GitHub on Podman for this, and if not, if you could.
As far as soliciting ideas for Play Cube,
yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and if you do, I'll add a note to our notes here for the meeting.
Yeah, I just don't know how many people use discussions at this point, so it seems fairly quiet.
So far, but the more we encourage it.
Yeah.
It looks like Eric is about to say something or would like to.
So many things. I fully agree with Brent that this is a key feature, and I think many people use Docker Compose basically because that's how they got started running multiple containers, right? But Play Cube is so much more powerful because it enables you to move your stuff to Kubernetes afterwards with just a little bit of overhead, or possibly maybe sometimes even no overhead. And so I think this is also this really big feature, but also quite complex. And for this request for experts, this is also why I think this kind of meeting is really good. Because if we find we have this kind of need for experts in this area, maybe this would be a good point to invite people, for instance, from the OKD community to maybe come by. You know, maybe I'm also in these meetings sometimes, and the next time I go there, I can ask them if one of them wants to join this call one time, and then we can discuss together how we can make a plan there, basically to get some Kubernetes expertise. And maybe they will say, you know, they are the same way as some of you people. Maybe they say they are the people who implement the underlying infrastructure, but they also don't know how people use the stuff on top. And then maybe it would be an interesting discussion for the user groups, for instance. In Germany, at least, we have an OpenShift user group. And there are a lot of people, they run a lot of stuff, even very big stuff on OpenShift clusters. And they also like to talk about it in the open. And maybe they want to join us and have a discussion about how we could implement part of their needs and their features with PlayCube.
Valentin, right now, Podman PlayCube and Podman System D Generate don't work well together, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So that's something else that, you know, we have internally. Customers are looking at. They want to make Podman PlayCube as being a primary way they want to run containers on a single node, and there's potential for us to get System D and Podman PlayCube to play nicer together. I think Valentin's head will explode because System D doesn't like a lot of stuff happening underneath the covers that it doesn't know about.
So what we're currently doing in Podman Generate System D is when creating a container, we store the exact arguments in the create command, which we store in the config, so that we work around the problem that we have to somehow extrapolate the Podman CLI from a container config. This is just a cheap way to say, okay, I type Podman create Fedora ls. This is stored in the container config, and when we do Podman generate systemd, we look at this list of arguments, we massage it a little bit, and then we can pipe it out or use it as a template. So when we do Podman PlayCube, we have not only containers, but an entire pod being generated just via Podman PlayCube. So we can't really get back to the systemd template. So also when we create systemd units for a pod, we create one for the pod, for the init container, and then one for each of the containers running inside this pod, so that we can treat them separately. So that if one of the containers running inside this pod would suddenly stop, depending on the restart policy, systemd would automatically restart it. All this wouldn't work anymore. Right. This is why we can't support Podman PlayCube. We could only support it if we would find a way to remap CLI or commands and flags based on a container config. So pretty much when you do a Podman inspect on a container, we would need to find out, you know, pretty much have a reverse mapping from this config back to the CLI flags. And I think that's just too complex. It's very error-prone.
I mean, one of the original goals with Podman systemd was to sort of give people the best practices for running containers inside of systemd, right? You did a ton of work to figure out, you know, how to interact well with systemd, because running containers under systemd is not, as I said, it's you know, lots of everybody that tries to do this by themselves ends up failing and coming to us, and then, you know, you usually get stuck trying to explain to them, oh, this is the best way to do it. So to me, if we had some way to generate, and it might be just, maybe it's a man page and say, oh, if you want to run Podman PlayCube inside of a systemd unit file, this is what your systemd unit file should look like. And maybe right now, I don't think we have a way. Is there a Podman play? There's no Podman play, Podman stop a play, right? So this might be something we want to add right now, because, you know, one of the cool things that OpenShift has, I mean, OpenShift, Compose has, is they have up and down, right? So you can do a compose up and a compose down. And maybe that's something we need to add to Podman PlayCube, which is, start this thing up and then clean it up. Right now, I think you have to, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask that exact question of someone who's used it that's not a Red Hatter. Sounds like at least Eric's used it. Do you find that it would be nice to be able to tear down what you've run with PlayCube?
Yeah. I think it's also a natural way when you start working with containers that you don't want to have them running all the time, and you basically want to get to this scale up, scale down situation, in a little bit more automated fashion.
Okay.
And so, having that kind of breakdown would be nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Something that we've been using is the kernel freezer, or the pause command for the cluster when running on containers. So we used to have it on virtual machines, and then you would just pause the hypervisor. But people were running like Docker in Docker and stuff, and they wanted to pause the process as it was. The current pause command is therefore using the kernel freezer, and that's pretty popular by users to like pause a running server or whatever. Mostly it's on Macs, because since it's running in a virtual machine, it eases the load of the machine when you paused all the containers. So the VM itself is not that heavy, but when you start running containers in the VM on a Mac, then it drains battery and whatnot. So if we leave Kubernetes running in the background, so now we have an auto pause feature. So if they haven't used the Kubernetes feature in a while, we pause the processes in the background, and then you can resume it at the later stage, mostly to save batteries. So that could be a feature, but it's somewhat orthogonal to starting and stopping, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we, as we go forward with this, that those type of ideas are cool, because people start to think of, the Kubernetes YAML file is becoming more of a core factor here. Maybe, I don't know. Again, we're specific with Podman. Our specific goal is not to compete against Kubernetes. Again, it's to make people allow people to more easily go from Kubernetes to a single host environment where they don't want to run, full blown Kubernetes, and to hopefully look at alternatives to Compose. Because Compose is, this is a huge base of people who want to play with Compose. Ed asked a question, or mentioned something in the chat. He talks about focusing on enabling small edge nodes. So those that don't know, Red Hat just published there's a blog that was published yesterday, not by us, by Red Hat, RHEL for Edge. So one of our goals, one of the things we've seen a lot of uptake for Podman has been in the IoT world and edge servers and some of the different environments. So there is a real, we do have a real focus, and if you follow in Valentin, just opened up a pull request yesterday to add some new features for, to sort of enhance auto update. And auto update is really aimed at edge servers. Basically, the goal here is to run services that humans don't have to touch, and they can run for years and years and just update themselves. As new image, you push an image to a registry, and all of a sudden your services out in the world get updated, and you don't have to go in and with an Ansible script or anything else and tell it to update. It just notices that this new image, destroys the container, and restarts it. So potentially something like that with pods and PlayCube. So we look at managing the life cycle of an application without humans getting involved, and that's sort of a side thing.
Just trying to wrap this up a little bit, because we're 5 minutes into our discussion period, and we've another discussion. So I'm going to go to Reinhard real quick, because he had a question first, or at least he had his hand up.
Sorry, that was an accident, but sorry.
Oh, okay. Then we will ignore that. And our next discussion point was discussion with the training team. And Eric, I think you brought this one in. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, so I was doing the DO 180 training, and I was running into a small issue there, and we couldn't really debug it because the version of Podman used in the VMs was too old. And Dan said he sent an email, and I expect usually a single email will just go unnoticed.
Not an email from me. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, they. What version was it? Was it 1.6 or was it 2.0?
Let me check. 1.6, yeah, 1.6.4.10.
Yeah. So 8.4 just, for all intents and purposes, in the real world, 8.4 just got released, right? It was released a month and a half ago or what. So I did get a response on that email saying that they plan on updating it. So hopefully it'll jump to RHEL 8.4, and that'll be version 3.0 of Podman. But yeah, it's good to keep on us. Obviously, we don't follow these things. Most of us are living in the Fedora world and don't look at training, Podman training. So anytime a community finds something like that, we'll do our best. But I will follow up on that. So Eric, because I describe myself as chief whiner at Red Hat, so I'll take your whine and try to amplify it.
Yeah. And there is a GitHub issue which I've put into the chat. It's in the meeting notes as well. That's related.
So what I thought, this was also basically what initiated the discussion about having this kind of meeting, is that we can invite someone from the training team who's working on these kind of curriculums, right? They have a situation why they are not using in your version. Maybe it's because they want to use the standard RHEL version that gets shipped to customers or something like this. And just to learn about their situation more, we could invite them to such kind of meeting and have a discussion together, and then we know what's the status, and maybe we can develop ideas, how to improve the situation, that we can debug such issues.
What I would excuse them on is I think as of last November, Podman 1.6 was the current version in RHEL. And so they might have developed the training before then. And I'm not sure how often they update. Podman moves a lot faster than people are updating training sessions. So.
Yeah, but sometimes we find an idea when people talk to each other. We find ideas, and so that's what basically what I thought.
Maybe if they ran the training inside of a container, then they could have the container automatically updated with the latest software.
That's a good idea. Yeah. What do you think about the idea? I mean, if you have a contact, maybe you can ask them if they would like to join and have such kind of discussion in this round.
We can. I will extend it if I can find who the person is.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, and that's everything about this topic already. I just wanted to check in and explain a little bit in a spoken way, basically, what I thought there.
Yeah.
No, that's
I don't
good.
know.
Thanks for sharing.
I'm not sure the trainer wouldn't be a little intimidated if he has 20 Podman experts, glaring at him. How come you didn't update your software latest?
Yeah.
Okay, we're at open discussion point. Tom, you're muted.
Me and the mute button, I just keep hopping back and forth between windows and keep losing the keyboard focus. Yeah, we're at the open discussion right now, so if anybody has anything that they want to ask or talk about.
I have a really quick hitter, and it was, did everyone make the jump over to Libera on IRC and followed us? Because you all sit in our IRC channel, right?
I haven't done that yet, I have to say.
Okay.
I was too lazy.
The key here is that, as Dan has told everyone, that's for our team, that's our primary communications. So if we're quite accessible and quite open. And actually, Dan has noted that Matt and Valentin and I do, and Paul, do quite a bit of queue it. If someone asks a question and it's a bug, we just go ahead and fix it right there. So
I would also plug the Podman Matrix channel. It has been bridged to the Libera chapter. Yeah, you can join one or the other.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
What is holding me back basically from using IRC a little bit is I don't have a setup at the moment where I can have a client running all the time, even if I'm not there. And then if I'm shutting down my computer and I go somewhere else and then I come back, I worry that I've missed like part of the discussion. Like if I ask a question and then 6 hours later, because also we have the time zone differences, someone else answers and I'm not there, then I don't see the answer.
Yeah, I think if you use Matrix, you can it will have all that data in it. So you might want to look at just hooking up with Matrix.
Yeah.
Matrix is an open source. For those that don't know, Matrix is an open source version of Slack or Google Chat. So for those of you guys that are crazy enough to put that stuff on your cell phones.
Yeah, and we've also been looking at putting Discord up to and hooking that into the Matrix. So that might be another way to go through, but that's not up yet. That's still being worked in progress at this point.
I think a lot of us just set up an IRC relay, or am I the only one that does that now?
So if we do, a lot of times. So going back to the original goal of this meeting, we have these meetings once or twice a month. Sometimes we have internal ones where we have to discuss internal Red Hat the Red Hat secrets and not actually secrets, but something that we can't, like future versions of RHEL and things like that. We have to pull those internal, but we're trying to do as much as possible external, so that people, we're trying to be as open as possible, at least the core developers that come from Red Hat. And so, usually the Cabal meetings are usually when we have a discussion that's going to take more than 5 minutes, we say, let's throw this in the Cabal meeting and discuss it. So like big designs or, just general talking about, what's the future? What should we do with this command? And, I like next month we could do something just on secrets. I'm sure, there's lots of interest in potentially doing secrets in different ways. So that'd be something that'd be Cabal. But anybody that from community wants to, I think Tom will make a agenda available, so that anybody that wants to talk from community about a specific subject would be more than willing to talk about that. And or we'll just load it up with our own topics, and you guys can listen to us drone on our internal conflicts. So anyways, I think we're pretty much done.
Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but
I'm going to, before we head out, I'm going to turn off the recording. And then before I do that, I'm just going to note that the next meeting for the Cabal is Thursday, August 19th, 2021. It will again be at 10 a.m. I'd like to thank everybody for being here and for the discussion. And Eric, thank you very much once again for going ahead and suggesting this and getting us going on this. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.
All right, now the real questions can start.
Well, actually, the recording did start. Oh, where'd it go? There it is.